By the late 17th century, the Mughal Empire controlled roughly 25% of the global GDP. They were a manufacturing powerhouse, accumulating vast wealth that rivaled the entire modern economies of some continents. This immense wealth was sustained by a highly regulated, standardized silver currency system that forced millions of peasants into a cohesive, empire-wide market network. But a century and a half earlier, in 1526, this empire didn't even exist. Instead, an outnumbered Timurid prince named Babur marched out of Central Asia to challenge the massive, entrenched Delhi Sultanate. So how did a military force that conquered the Indian subcontinent and engineered such massive wealth eventually collapse so rapidly under its own weight? At the First Battle of Panipat, Babur's invading force was drastically outnumbered by the Sultanate's army. To survive, Babur deployed a tactical formation known as the Araba. His troops placed rows of carts in the center of the battlefield and tied them together with animal hide to create an artificial defensive wall. Behind this makeshift barricade, Babur positioned his matchlock infantry and maneuverable heavy cannons. Protected from direct cavalry charges, his artillery could fire continuously without fear of being overrun. While the center held firm, Babur split his cavalry into forward and rear divisions, sending them sweeping in wide arcs to surround the enemy flanks in a maneuver called Tulugma. The Sultan's forces were entirely unprepared for the shock of gunpowder warfare. The deafening roar of the cannons terrified the Sultanate's war elephants, causing them to panic and trample their own soldiers. The Delhi Sultanate fell. The Mughal Empire was born from this specific application of disruptive military technology, overwhelming superior numbers with calculated innovation. After securing their territory, the Mughals shifted from conquest to administration. They funded their expanding state through a strict agrarian tax system, extracting well over half of a peasant's agricultural output in cash. This relentless revenue stream financed architectural projects on a massive scale, reaching a peak under Emperor Shah Jahan. Buildings like the Taj Mahal served as ultimate projections of imperial power. Shah Jahan even constructed an entirely new walled capital city, Shah Jahanabad, pouring immense resources into defensive fortifications like the Red Fort. These structures contained deliberate hierarchical symbolism. The Mughals systematically combined white marble, traditionally recommended for the Hindu priestly caste, with red sandstone, the color of the warrior caste and Persian imperial tents. By encoding this specific color scheme into their monuments, the Mughals physically built their political legitimacy into the local culture, defining themselves as absolute rulers in traditional Indian terms. The tipping point arrived with Shah Jahan's successor, Aurangzeb, and his relentless pursuit of the Deccan policy, a series of endless, grueling military campaigns to conquer the south. Under Aurangzeb, Mughal borders expanded from Kabul in the northwest down to the Kaveri River in the deep south. But maintaining control over such massive distances drained the imperial treasury. These protracted southern wars ground down the army, destroying the empire's most elite soldiers. At the exact time they were bleeding resources, the Mughal military stagnated. They stopped introducing the field tactics and gunpowder reforms that had secured their early victories. Having subdued their external rivals, the empire became a victim of its own scale. They rotted from sheer overextension and an inability to adapt their aging war machine. When Aurangzeb died in 1707, the empire fractured. Factionalism at court triggered rapid wars of succession, emptying whatever remained in the central treasury. This chart shows the widening gap between assessed revenue and realized revenue, a situation historians call the agrarian crisis. Lower-ranking officials, desperate to maintain their wealthy lifestyles, aggressively exploited the peasantry to make up the shortfall. The rural economy broke under the pressure. Peasants fled their lands en masse, driving down agricultural productivity, driving up food prices, and triggering a wave of regional deindustrialization. An empire built entirely on the taxing of agricultural output had stripped away the very will of its subjects to support the regime. Compare the calculating, innovative founders of the Mughal Empire to its later rulers. By the 1720s, a man named Muhammad Shah sat on the throne, earning the nickname Rangila, or the Colorful. He abandoned governance entirely. While the empire's infrastructure crumbled, He spent his time consumed by courtly dances, poetry, and music, ignoring military strategy and border security. When warned that enemy forces had crossed the border, his famous dismissive response was, "Hanuz Dili Durast," meaning Delhi is still far away. Delhi was not far enough. Independent regional states rose up to fill the vacuum, global textile market share shifted to Europe, and eventually the British Raj stepped in to formally dissolve the hollowed-out imperial shell in 1857. True superpower status requires relentless innovation. No amount of past military glory, artistic brilliance, or vast hoarded wealth can save a state that chooses complacency over progress.